One thing is for certain is that we know that Jada Pinkett Smith is overly promoting her new book called Worthy that actually houses multiple revelations about not just herself, but also about Will Smith and the entire family and everything related to her own personal decisions. That she actually has a lot of problems with SNL calling her out and creating a parody of her, and to the point where she's going to go on the Howard Stern show on Sirius XM by the last week of this month to really call out the heads of NBC and those that mocked her on the program. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. I'm also on Twitter at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support. Now, the one thing about Jada Pinkett Smith that I think that we could all really see right now is how she is going on endless podcasts, radio shows, TV shows, and let's not forget about how she will never let go of promoting her new book. She is seemingly just obsessed with putting her book out there, most likely having to do with the fact that it might not be selling as much as she had hoped for, and that's also probably another factor into why you are seeing her talk about such nonsense almost every other day. But what's interesting about Jada Pinkett Smith is her overall view of Chris Rock, the Oscars slap situation, Will Smith, and a whole lot more, and it just keeps getting worse, not just for Jada, but also for both Chris and Will getting dragged into the drama that are just trying to walk away from all of this garbage. Now, what's interesting about this is that we know that Jada Pinkett Smith is someone that is a narcissist, is a pathological liar, and you really have to wonder to yourself, what she ever says, is any of it really true at the end of the day? That's a bigger question. Now, with Jada Pinkett Smith currently over-promoting her book that unveils new revelations about Will Smith and more, one major development has to do with what Jada actually had to say about Chris Rock by delivering the following. What I will say I am happy to actually be very open to discuss about is how Chris Rock, that really should have never been said, led to Will defending me, and it's had brought us closer to each other than I would have ever even imagined with the jokes that Chris presented at the Oscars. So I will say that I am thankful for what happened to Chris when it came to what Will did on stage. Though I viewed his jokes as talentless and holding no value for laughs, it truly redeemed my connection to Will. So I will say that I am glad that Will and what he did to Chris, I mean at the time, and now I still to this day feel Chris deserved what he got from what Will of course did, but I actually must admit that what Will did was something that could have been handled through words, but I don't think we would have actually had a redemption for our connection if it weren't for Chris Rock getting shamed like that on stage from what Will, of course, actually did to him for making those terrible jokes at the time. I will never forget, and Chris tried to ask me out one time, when he believed that Will and I were heading into a divorce. He actually asked me on multiple occasions out on a date, and I just had to shut him down. I think this is something that needs to be said repeatedly because not everyone knows that this actually happened. Chris was way over his head and believed that I was going to be single soon and wanted to take advantage of that. I have mentioned this before, but he apologized quickly and he did it after getting so embarrassed. I think he hates it when I talk about this and makes it public, but I think it's necessary to show that side of Chris and that side of me as well. As far as I see things, as far as I see it, though, I see everything that Chris received at the Oscars as a grace to my relationship with Will. Now guys, let me just stop here quick about what Jada is saying about how she's proud of what happened to Chris Rock on stage. She views this as basically this saving grace of her connection to Will Smith, and not just that, she's also putting it out there publicly that Chris Rock on multiple occasions tried to ask her out, knowing or thinking at least that she was getting a divorce. Now, look, I've said this multiple times before in the past. I'm not quite sure if that's true. We'll have to wait and see what Chris actually has to say about that. If he has commented on this, presently, I would like to know if you guys have come across that. But what's interesting about this is how Jada is literally just putting Chris at the forefront here, stirring up more drama. Whether what she says is false or true, who knows? That'll eventually be either debunked or made out to be the truth by Chris Rock. We'll have to wait and see. But I'm not quite sure. Do you guys think Chris Rock would really go out of his way to ask Jada Pinkett Smith on a date or ask her out that quickly after learning that they would be going through a divorce? I'm not quite sure, and that's interesting to say the least, but I think what Jada's really trying to do at the end of the day, she's really doing anything or saying anything, whether it's true or not, to kind of stir up more drama, for people to pay more attention to not just herself, but also to her book. That's how desperate I think she is for sales right now. Because we know that the Britney Spears book is completely destroying Jada Pinkett Smith's sales. And I think that's bothering her at the end of the day. I really do. Now, we know that she congratulated Britney Spears. We all know about that, but I don't think it was genuine. I think it was just a way to kind of boost her image, to be honest. But moving on, alright? She goes on to elaborate further. I plan to shed more light on the things that Chris tried to do and say to me in future books, perhaps, but I don't really want to go into that or unveil my plans so early on that just yet. That should be a surprise. So I guess you could say this is a teaser of what I have in store for the future. But no hate on Chris. We're all past everything. He's just a man that couldn't and never will understand some boundaries and what had happened at the Oscars and after. And that's his story to tell, and so it is for Will. I have never been so grateful for what happened at the Oscars. If it weren't for what happened to Chris, I don't know if Will and I would actually have evolved in our marriage. This is why I say I am glad what happened to Chris. My relationship with Will is getting closer to where we were years ago, before our split, and before the problems that we were having in all departments of our marriage. But that's a story for another time. I think it's best to let that sleep for a little while until I can convince Will that he's ready to let that out. Now again, do you guys not see what's going on here? She's being very manipulative again about Will Smith. Things like, oh, I gotta wait until I can try to convince him to get those stories out there, to get those secrets out there in a future book or story, whatever it may be. I think what's really happening here is that Will is absolutely trapped in this marriage, one way or the other. You know, one would argue or debate that Will is voluntarily just sticking with it in this marriage for some specific reason. But I think that there's something else going on there that we're never going to learn about unless Will comes forward, which I think is very unlikely at this point. And the fact that she's using these books for monetary gain by throwing out a lot of revelations out there about not just his life, but also about hers and Chris Rock's, I think is just absolutely disgusting and really totally offensive toward those, you know, that are just trying to get out of this drama. Chris and Will, you know, they're totally just trying to depart themselves from all of the Oscars drama that has spewed online and throughout different media outlets. And Jada just keeps stirring it up. She just keeps making matters worse. So overall, I would like to hear what you all have to say about this below in the comments, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys later.